Good afternoon, everybody. My name is Brian Fretwell, and this is the Finding Blueberries or Finding Good podcast. It is noon today. I am on my own, so I'm really hoping to have one of y'all join live. This podcast is about finding good. It's about practicing connection. My name is Brian Fretwell, and this hour or so is going to be about the art of practicing connection. Like what connection looks like. Connection is the most powerful, most important skill that we have as humans that allows us to do more things than any other skill we can have. If we're able to build authentic, genuine, lasting connections with other people, we're able to see ourselves better. We are healthier. There's hundreds and thousands of documented studies that say connection is one of the healthiest things we can do, but it's also one of the biggest things we can do to contribute to our success, to our happiness, those sorts of things. The challenge is that most of us don't approach it as a practice. So what we're doing on this podcast is turning the page or flipping the script, as you were, a little bit from the normal call-in podcast where people call in to get advice, to get opinion, to get what we call SOFA, suggestions, opinion, feedback, or advice. And we're opening the phone lines. You can see it in the comment. You can click there at any time. You can message. I'll send you a link. I'm happy to have you join. And we'll do the practice of connection. We call this finding good. Spend a little time finding maybe what went well in your week, maybe what went well in your year. We might talk about a strength that you've developed. We might talk about an experience. But what we know through the science of connection is that historically, the practice of connection involves sitting around the campfire, sharing our experiences. When we hear the experience of another person, our brain perceives that experience as our own. So in this process, we find confidence, we find clarity, we find self-awareness through the process of connecting. In our current environment, our current social world that we live in, this process has become muddied with everyone giving advice, everyone giving opinions, everyone giving their insights, and everyone also feeling disconnected, lonely, or isolated. So what we're going to do is try to avoid the trap of the expert, of the advice giver, of the opinion giver, and lean in on the questions. Now, today is kind of interesting because what we're going to cover, if nobody shows up, is like there's a get out of jail free card, is I don't have anybody else here. So Ren or Angela or others often join, to kind of counterbalance. And Ren is off on a bike ride. I think she's doing biking and pies. I just heard that much and said, go have fun. So today I'm here by myself, which I think is a really good opportunity to talk about the challenges of connecting when you are feeling isolated, the challenges connecting when we have low self-awareness, and talk about some of the things that we actually don't often think about that make connecting harder. Our brain's drive to have others see our value can make us do activities or make us do behaviors that psychologists would call maladaptive, or they would make us do things that actually make connection harder, right? So I'm going to talk about that today. At any time, if somebody joins live, we're going to stop that conversation and go have a finding good conversation, because that's really what we want this podcast to be about. The other thing I'll do in between there, either before or after, is I'm going to talk to you a bit, and maybe this is where we'll start actually, is I want to talk to you a bit more about what we're doing here, because there's the intro and talking about connection, but I want to share a little bit about my reasoning behind this, like what I'm really trying to do, why it's important enough for me to show up and do it live. Of course, we could do this recorded, but why the live piece is recorded, and sort of my commitment, because right now doing this live twice a week is more than just a planned event. It's something I will be doing all summer for one specific reason. And that reason is because it's uncomfortable. And not just uncomfortable to me, but I really, the idea of live streaming this is Finding Good is 5 years old now. This is a process that started honestly 10 years ago with a small group of my friends, and there's a video on TikTok and Instagram right now that talk about where this started. But we had a group of friends that are very close now, and we were close at the time. But what we noticed in our 30s is that relationships seem to sort of like grow apart. And we lived 600 miles apart, but we noticed that like the times we would get together were weddings or funerals or big parties, but the opportunity to actually connect, to actually like share what was going on was limited. Now, at the time I was working in the, if you will, broadly the neuroscience field. I was a consultant working with neuroleadership and incentives to like safe culture change and neuroscience-based companies. And so I knew a bit about the neuroscience and specifically about like kind of positive psychology. And so Kibby and I, who had been working together actually for a while, he was a coaching client. I decided we're not going to do coaching anymore. We're just going to have a weekly phone call where we talk about what went well. Now, as I share that, and I think it's important for these conversations, what we practiced in that first year is not what we do now. And actually, what we practice is how a lot of people think about or picture in their head what went well conversation might go without any background. What I mean by that is we took this idea of like positivity and helping kind of motivate each other. And initially it was like, well, I don't want you to hold me accountable, and I don't want to hold you accountable, because we were friends. So we understood that distinction, that, if we were setting goals with each other, eventually we were going to like avoid seeing each other because we didn't want to be held accountable or things like that nature. So we understood that difference. But the other piece, though, that we did initially was we showed up just talking about like the wins. And I remember in that first year, maybe a little more, it was very performative. And I think this happens a lot in the sort of broader positive psychology kind of, I wouldn't say movement, but interpretation, maybe, especially when we get into the pop culture kind of interpretation, that all we need to do is talk about the good things and ignore the bad things. And so when we were showing up weekly, again, really early on, we were talking about what we thought was good. Oh, I achieved this and I did this. And it felt a lot like bragging. And then somewhere in there, maybe partly in the second year, I remember it very distinctly that that somebody showed up, and I believe it was Tom. By the way, we had John on here a couple of weeks ago, and having Kibby and Tom is really just a matter of time. But there was one specific day when I believe it was Tom, when we knew he was struggling. We knew things were going on. He had started a business and these things. And I remember distinctly, and at least it was a turning point for me, that he came on and said, I spent 20 extra minutes with my kid. And I remember that clearly because it was a bit of a shift. Because I think before we were talking about what went well, again, in the place that we were comfortable talking about. And as we'll talk this Friday when Heather comes on, there is a benefit to be able to talk about more sort of low level, if you want to say, things that went well. But what we had sort of unconsciously agreed on was what went well were these goals and these wins, and we were keeping us on track for being successful. And it was about sharing how we're successful and almost feeling as though we were kind of like trying to convince ourselves we were successful, right? And then when Tom said that, the nature of that question, what went well, changed. And I think as we've adapted that over 10 years, for me specifically, the nature of that question, what went well, is what are you doing that matters? What are you doing that's important to you? Right? What is the thing that you're really kind of focused on, and what, how are you getting over the challenges? How are you moving through the real parts of life. And so what we hear on that call on a weekly basis has changed. Now, going back to why I started this is the being able to do this live is actually, and doing it consistently is about like leaning into, if we're going to help other people, on one hand, do what Kibby, John, and Tom and I do, but also change the way we look at connection from this thing that I'm either really good at or not. This thing that's a soft skill that is really great in a deep conversation, or it's really great in these, magical moments, into what it actually is, which is a survival necessity, the most important skill that we can develop, and something that we have to consciously develop. It's not something that automatically happens. And so if we're going to kind of make a dent and shift how people think about that, stepping into the discomfort of a live, showing these conversations live and in real time with real people, I think is just exponentially more valuable than sort of a recorded and rehearsed, showcasing of it, or even, talking about just the science behind it. Now, some of the things we'll do on the podcast and with the unplanned guest and the planned guest is really talk to them about your connection practice. So the reality is, if you're interacting with other humans, and if you're interacting with yourself, you have a connection practice, meaning like habitual ways that you're trying to, successfully or not, connect. You have sort of often, for most people, I know this was true for myself, some sort of unconscious goals you have for connecting, like the relationships you want, the team dynamic you want, the leadership or coaching that you want to either do or receive. And so in these interactions, really asking people about what those are. So, and sometimes to surface that, because maybe we've not said it out loud, but then also look at what is the practice, and are the practices we're engaging in giving us the connection we need. And so this is about showcasing one of what I think is the more powerful practices of connection, which is hearing the good in someone else's story, finding ourselves in their story, and seeing the value in their story. Because I think underneath all types of connection, humans are designed to exchange value. And in that, our brain wants to know, does the pack see my value? And when we don't feel like the pack sees our value, we can do some pretty maladaptive, to use that term again, things to kind of feel valued by others. And if we don't know that we're doing that, they can turn into really nasty habits that keep us from having the connection and experiencing the benefits of connection that we need at the same level that we need food and water. All right. With that, we're about 14 minutes or so in. If you'd like to be a guest, I have it there in the comments. There's a click here to be a guest. You can comment here and I will see it. I'm just going to say hello all in the comments. If you comment there and you're not sure about like how to click on that and sign up, if you comment in there or in the private chat to me, I can invite you up on stage. Don't worry, it's not going to throw you right on stage. It'll throw you into kind of a waiting room. But if you're interested in coming in and having a finding good conversation, that's what it'll be about. The early episodes, there's going to be a lot shorter lines as we start moving through the summer. People understand what we do, what we're doing here. I think we'll fill those up pretty quick. Appreciate the viewers that are on here. I can see a little bit, but not a whole lot, because I'm handling all the stuff on my own today. But again, this is a Finding Good podcast. And if anybody is looking for a little clarity or just wants to talk about connection, that's what the live call-in is for. What we're engaging in today, talking about, we just talked a little bit about what this podcast is about and why. The idea that we have to change the way we look at connection. We have to make connection much more purposeful, and turning it into a practice is the idea. And the second thing we're going to talk about that I think is really apropos right now is, like, and today is just a really good opportunity to do it because I'm here by myself. It's how connection becomes harder when you are by yourself, like the real fears that are underlying that, and some of the science behind those fears. So I can tell you today, like, we had a couple of people signed up to join, but I know that, like, that can be tough for folks of, like, how to get on. I don't know. I may be even making it harder for people to get on here in terms of, not knowing if the links are working or things of that nature. But when I saw the first two people, that there were two people signed up, I knew that there was a chance that I was going to be on here alone. And I want to address that because I want to address, like, the reality behind that, because it doesn't, maybe there are some people that wouldn't give that a second thought, that jump into it. And I think there was a time for me where I thought that was me, right? Where I would be like, oh, I don't care. I'm not afraid. And I would just kind of lean into it and do it. And the reality was I was a little bit afraid, right? I just kind of over, like, the insecurity of even talking about the discomfort of, boy, I might be there by myself. And what does this mean? Does this mean people don't like me? Does this mean people don't like the message? Does this mean something's wrong with me? Those are thoughts that can roll into anyone's head. And they certainly do roll into mine. And so today was that opportunity. I saw that, like, okay, this is a new podcast. I'm going to be up here on alone. So I went through the, what did I do wrong? Those sorts of things. But here is where we kind of all stall out, is we start to believe that stuff in the back. And more importantly, or more dangerously, we start to believe that the reason we're showing up is for the outcome itself. What I mean by that, like in this podcast, is the reason I show up is so that I can have a great conversation, right? Or have somebody find clarity in finding good conversation. Now, that's a benefit of showing up. Do I want that to happen? Would that be awesome to happen? Absolutely. But that is not the reason to show up. And if I start to say, like, oh, if I can't have this outcome, then I won't show up, then I miss the connection practice. And in this case, the connection practice is a practice for just me, if you will, because, like, we connect with other people and then we connect with ourselves. And so this becomes a practice of, like, leaning into that discomfort, right? And I want to share that because, like, when we think about connecting with others, especially if we've been disconnected, especially if we've been isolated, if it's new people, so many different scenarios, we can run the scenario in our head and see the discomfort and avoid the discomfort because we're worried that the outcome of that connection won't be what we want. But when we do that, it's the input or the practice that we miss. To explain this in a way that I think we're more trained to understand, if you will, if we thought about that is like a yoga practice, right? And I said, I'm going to go to this 1 hour yoga practice or session. I don't know what they call them. I go to yoga every once in a while, like a couple of years ago, but if I went there saying, this practice is going to be successful if I'm able to do a full handstand. And maybe I haven't done a handstand, like, in a long time or ever. Maybe I haven't done yoga at all, but I have this expectation. Then what happens is I go into the yoga session for an hour and I may do a bunch of great things, but I don't do the handstand. I'm going to leave that yoga session feeling like it was a waste of time, feeling like, I shouldn't have, like, it wasn't worth the time I took to do it, that I didn't get anything out of it, all of those things. But the reality is the fact that I showed up, right, is, in and of itself is beneficial. But also in the practice, while I was in there, I had numerous times where I probably did like a stretch or an activity that benefited me. I probably had a lot of instances where I was able to, like slow my mind down, right? Get the physical and all the health benefits of it. But if I go in thinking that I'm only successful if I get this outcome, I don't get to register those benefits, right? I might physically, I register them because I did it, but mentally I can leave feeling worse. And that's sort of the same again with connection, is when we're like isolated, when connection is hard. And again, that might be new people. That might be because I have not been connecting in a while. That might be because something happened bad in my life and I don't want to go out and interact. If we think that like the connection, like the interaction, the conversation, right, has to be good, or it has to be deep, or whatever the case, then we miss the fact that like, oh, I haven't been reaching out to others. The practice of reaching out to them is the reason, or is the benefit, if you will. Then I get so much more out of it. And if I can identify that like, oh, I'm just going to go to this interaction to practice connecting. It sounds weird, but I'm going to practice being a human, practice this interaction here. Then I'm going to be more comfortable next time going. Right now, if I again say I'm going to go practice this and it's going to turn out well, and I'm going to come out with a new friend or a new relationship or this deep conversation, then I can go practice, do it, and actually leave less interested in doing it again. But again, that doesn't make sense. If I haven't been running a long time and I say I'm going to go running now, and if I don't run 10 miles, then I'm a failure, but I run 5 really good, then I'm going to leave now thinking I can't run again, even though if I had said I'm going to go run, see how far I can run, see how it feels, like test my body, use this as an opportunity to understand myself a little bit more, to understand where I'm at. Then when I leave the 5 miles, I can feel really good and actually maybe even look forward to 6 the next time, or 7, or just 5 again. But that's often really hard to kind of, if you will, process when you're kind of like wrestling with that stuff by yourself, right? And I think like being able to change that then changes the outcome. That's the idea of the practice here. Well, I see we have somebody in the guest event. Raise your hand if you'd like to come up on stage. It's okay if you don't. And so I won't even say your name because you're not, so nobody can see you right now if you're in the guest. So for anybody, if you join as a guest, you'll have a little, I can see your video. But if you'd like to jump on the stage and have a finding good conversation, raise your hand. If not, you can do it like a thumbs down for now, right? That's true. Yeah. Oh, I have a little message in there then. Awesome. All right. So I'm going to bring Ty on stage. So, hey, Ty. Yeah.
Hey, Brian.
Good to see you. Yeah. Well, thanks you for jumping on. Like, I feel like we got the, one of the benefits of connection just by having somebody join me on stage, especially with Ren not here, right? You can almost feel the energy shift, at least for me, right? which is part of the practice on here. Yeah. I'm curious, Ty, was there anything you wanted to chat about? So for those who don't, so Ty has been part of Finding Good for a while. You come to the weekly sessions, so you're a practice expert. You're certified, even, right? But I want to thank you for showing up. And what kind of conversation do you want to have? Yeah. Was it anything you were looking for, or just like open and let's try something on and see where you're at?
I'm open. Part of me wanted to just see if you could talk for an hour straight.
Yeah. Well, we got close. We got a half hour in there. Yeah. Well, do you mind? Oh, go ahead.
So the other part is, if you knew I was there the entire time and I didn't raise my hand.
Oh yeah, no, I did not know. I'm not able to see like who's there in a weird. I think that might be. But I am curious though. I think this is actually a kind of a good opportunity with this one because you have been through the certification and done some coaching. One of the things I want to do on the podcast is actually show how it works in either direction. Right. And so I would give that to everybody because I don't want to put people on the spot, but I'll give you the opportunity. Like there's some questions I would be keen to find a good conversation. I'm keen to engage in with you, with me leading the questions. But if you would like to take a stab at engaging some questions, happy to do that as well.
Please
Which
go
would
ahead.
you? Okay, fair enough. And just so everybody that watches, that's watching, knows what's going on, like a finding good conversation is a conversation you can have with anyone, a complete stranger, right? And that's one of the reasons we're doing these live episodes is like you don't really need pretense because there are things that we know about all humans that give us an idea on the story we can get from them or the experience or the value we can get from them. And now when I say value we can get from them, it feels one-sided. But when we think about that through the lens of when somebody tells a story to someone who's interested in that story, that person feels value. So my job is to identify the value I want. And that is the thing that eventually helps Ty feel valued. It's also the thing that creates clarity, that kind of that becomes almost the magic in this, right? So I just want to explain that before I start with but it's Ty because we've had some good conversations as of late. But I'm curious, Ty, like just as a broad question, how do you even want to turn up the intensity a bit, but I'll start with this. Like, yeah, actually, I just not quite as intense. Like, I'm feeling pretty happy today myself. So I'm just curious, like, if you were to look back in the last 6 months, like, what was your happiest moment?
The last 6 months have been kind of a blur, but I would say maybe completing my recent story brand certification.
Like, yeah. So tell me more about that. Like, what made that your happiest moment?
So I was introduced to StoryBrand a couple of years ago, and it really resonated with me. Like I wished that I had been exposed to that book, years ago, long before it was ever written, right? It just aligned with my particular insights about marketing and communication. And at the time, the certification parameters were such that I wasn't really qualified to pursue that certification because it was meant for agencies and writers,
right?
And they've pivoted that, and so being able to pursue it as an individual was very exciting because it was on my bucket list of things to do, and I didn't think it was going to happen so soon.
Like, so tell me about I almost want to jump right into like the moment. Like, why was like when? Tell me the moment that you were happy. And what I mean by that is like when you got the certification, when you finished the class, when you signed up, like if that was the happiest day, like what was the moment in that day that you felt happiest?
It was probably in the middle of the certification. The fact that, you and I have talked about my, I don't know, sort of medical, physiological history, right? And I used to be that food was kind of my enemy, and it would really inhibit me from thinking clearly. So a lot of brain fog. And so the fact that I made it through the first day completely present for that training and no brain fog, no fatigue, like it was it was a huge accomplishment for me to be present at that level.
So the happiness had more to do, was more than just I finished this certification, right? Like, what did it? So because of those challenges and that, like, what do you think it said about you? Or like, yeah, like what? To be able to make it through the day meant what to you?
Since I've sort of fixed this food issue, there's been new levels of discovery happening about what I'm actually capable of, because I used to just get sidelined pretty quickly. So it meant that I could show up for myself in whatever I wanted to do and be able to achieve it.
So that being able to show up for yourself, if you were talking about somebody else and you were describing somebody who like valued being able to show up for themselves, how would you describe them? What kind of person?
The person that shows up for themselves? Is that what you're asking?
Yeah, that values that.
That values
that being able to do that makes them happy.
Probably individuals that like accomplishment, that like to learn, that like to put themselves in learning opportunities.
Yeah, if you were to have one word, they are this type of person, what do you think it would be?
Just curious work.
Is that like what sparked in that moment then, was like a curiosity?
It wasn't curiosity. It was I don't know, it was definitely satisfying.
Right.
But
yeah, tell me more, like the feeling in there at the time, like describe, like, because you said it was like halfway through the day, and it sounds like you referenced, oh, I'm going to be able to make it through the whole day. And so like, was there an actual like physical feeling or like an emotional state that you were in?
I mean, it's one of those instances where the things that you love sort of bring extra energy to the situation. And so
tell me more about that. What is that? What do you mean by that?
Well, I mean, like the book 6 Types of Working Genius talk about the energy that comes from doing things that are sort of core to our being, right? If they're really sort of spark something in us, they become their own source of energy. The alternate to that is having it drain us because it's just not core to who we are.
And what was the thing that you were doing at that moment that was core to your being?
I was learning and I was accomplishing, but I mean, it was a reference point for me, because prior to having solved this food issue, which kind of chased me for 26 years, I wasn't able to show up for anything that I wanted to do on my own, because I just didn't know how I was going to feel. So the fact that I was there and present and cognitively functioning, like, it was a big win for me.
It sounded to me like it was like breaking a barrier.
Yeah.
Can you explain that to me? What was the barrier you were breaking?
It was a barrier of personal capability, I think. Just didn't.
And what I'm curious about is actually like, is that the thing that makes you happy?
Breaking barriers?
Yeah.
It might be.
Yeah. Do you see the shift just now? Did you see
yeah,
your energy shift right now? Like, what are you thinking about?
Yeah, I'm thinking about achieving new things.
Yeah, tell me more.
Something out there that I would like to do, mostly to prove to myself that I can do it.
Yeah. Yeah.
But yeah, there's an element of curiosity, but it's also tied into learning, and I love to learn.
Yeah. That breaking barriers seems like it's pretty important too. That trigger of like maybe halfway through that day, you felt like the barrier was being broken and there's an energy that came with it.
Yeah.
Is that, yeah. That's it. And so that's, yeah, that's interesting. And to kind of back up meta on the conversation, like when we're looking for you were having, kind of a connection practice conversation, or finding good conversation. It's that's for me, that's kind of like we can certainly go on with the conversation and the things we can do here, but it's that new discovery that I think is like if there's a end goal that we're achieving, it's that one. And I say that because as we debrief on this, when you think about breaking barriers, like, well, have you thought about happiness in terms of breaking barriers before?
I don't think I have. It's definitely something that is in the back of my mind, is something that I'm always sort of pursuing. Still kind of learning to recognize daily joys that would lead to happiness rather than waiting for some destination on the horizon to deliver happiness.
Yeah. When you do think about breaking barriers, then like just in this conversation, like how are your process, like how does that change how you see things going forward, if at all? Like what ideas does it spark? Things of that nature?
I think I would begin to look at things as less permanent or less infinite. Like there are milestones that I can achieve along the way rather than that distant destination that I have no idea what it looks like or how I'm eventually going to get there. But if I look at it as a series of small wins along the way.
Yeah. These little like barriers that I can break along the way. Yeah. What's cool about that, and what, just to wrap the audience in, that may be listening live or in the as we do the recording on this, the key here in terms of what happened in this conversation is I didn't know we were going here, and as Ty said, like he hadn't made that connection before. And the way we get to that connection is just me being curious, right? And it's not a magic trick necessarily. Like it takes a lot of practice to stay in your own curiosity. So for me, when I'm asking, Ty about happiness, I'm actually thinking about my own. And when I think about my own, then I want some more kind of detail in his answer, right? So he said, I was happy at, the getting the certification. And so I want to check in, like, does the certification make you happy? Because I'm checking in for myself. I've gotten certifications and not been happy and then had experiences where I was happier. Right. And then as we go deeper into that conversation, it's not deeper into the conversation, it's getting into the details, because this is where most our conversations stop. Where were you happiest? Ty tells me when I was getting the certification. Cool. What did that mean to you? It meant this. And that's the conversation. And the problem with that is that, like, the clarity of breaking barriers is sort of Ty won't get by himself. Or at least it's a lot harder to get by ourselves, because there's no reason to go in and clarify that story. I did this, it makes me happy, I'll do it again. The problem is, if I think that was the certification that makes me happy, then I go find certifications again, right? But when we have that clarity, because I'm looking at, like, okay, instead of asking Ty, like, what makes you happy? Certification. Now I'm going to go get a certification myself. We actually both become a little bit better off, that, like, now I know, okay, it's actually this breaking the barriers thing for Ty that I can super relate to. And then Ty also knows that. And so maybe that's a certification, maybe it's not, but it's a whole lot of other opportunities there as well. And that is the practice of connection, is two people creating that clarity for each other's benefit. I'm curious, Ty, your thoughts of on the conversation, or like how it went, or or the questions. Any questions you have, or like insights that you might have.
I didn't expect the outcome,
right?
But it's insightful, and some of those, for me, some of the biggest insights in my life have just been really small moments just like that.
Yeah.
And it takes a little bit of time to just slow down and get there.
Yeah. And tell me more about those. Like, when do you generally have those? Like, when do those moments, come up for you? Like, when you think about them?
I would say someone else is probably involved. There's probably a conversation. There's probably a challenge to an existing way of thinking.
Yeah. So it's those, if you will, the moments of connection, and that like slow down part is like, it's so important, because that's people talk all the time about, like, oh yeah, I heard your story, or I told the story, but we don't explore the story. Right. And this happens on both sides. Like, what I mean by both sides is the person that is generally a talker, and then the person that's generally a listener, right? Like, oh, I heard somebody's story. Well, I just let them talk a bunch. Or I told my story and I just talked, right? But there's no engagement. There's no, sort of curiosity that is being kind of employed, right? And because of this, we think we know each other's story, but we've just barely scratching the surface, if you will, right? Of what's underneath that, the whys and the hows, and this process of like kind of being a bit more, I say selfish, but it's identifying the value you're seeking when you're asking about the other person's story. Because the cool thing is, like, when you lit up on breaking barriers, right? When you're like physiology changed on that, I had this like little jolt of like, oh yeah, I know what that's about. I know the breaking barriers thing. Like, yeah, I'm in on that. Yeah. And you felt that shift too. Yeah. Yeah. And I love that. Like, so, the other thing I wanted to ask is, like, cause you said I wasn't expecting that. What were you expecting?
I don't think I had any expectations. I know well enough now to have that when I have conversations with Brian Fretwell that things are going to come up that were not on my radar. But
and if it makes you feel any better, it's not on my radar either.
Okay.
In terms of like the specifics, but the clarity is on the radar, because I like, that's the for me, the reason to showcase this to people is that, like, I've been doing this so long, like, I'm just really comfortable leaning in. Like, most people aren't going to be, but I want to show that what can happen when you are that comfortable with it. It's not like a magical skill. Like, it's not, anybody can do this, but not without practice. Right. But if you practice that, if I was looking for inspiration today, I just got it. Right. If I was just looking for insights, I just got it. Right. If I was looking to kind of clarify my story, again, I just got it through your story, and just through that lean in on the curiosity, and that again, that like the purpose of this podcast is to show that. And especially as we were talking earlier, as I was kind of talking earlier about this idea of like, it gets harder to connect when you're feeling disconnected, when something happened, when, like you've been isolated for a while, or just like, you just don't feel like interacting. For me, that's where Finding Good becomes this like great tool of, if I know the right questions, right, I will then be able to have really great interactions. I won't feel like I don't feel like I needed to talk more or the other way around. I feel like we had a good interaction, and I like that was like equal and balanced. Even though I was the only one asking questions, I got value and you got value. I'm curious if for you, if it feels balanced, or you feel like, or there's a like, oh, I feel like I need to ask questions or anything else.
No, it feels balanced to me, and it's, learning the finding good methodology, coming back to that idea of slowing down again. Like when I am having conversations with people, usually like my previous mentality was trying to put together all the pieces and figure out where they're going with the story. Like it's almost like I'm trying to get to the end before they do.
Yeah. So I can look smart. No, and I'm not putting that on you. That's me. Like, oh, I can like do. And if you're ADD, you're like, you can put it together and then you look like a damn genius. And you didn't. Anyway, go ahead. Sorry. Yeah. Like you put it together so that you can, what's the payoff, right? What's the payoff for you when you put it all together?
Yeah. I mean, it's selfish and it's really fleeting. Like it has no value to the other person.
Yeah.
But what I've enjoyed about the process is slowing down and going, okay, there was something interesting that I could ask about.
Yes.
And like just by virtue of stopping and recognizing that there are things that I don't know throughout the conversation automatically makes the conversation feel more meaningful to me and more rich. Even if I don't ask any of those questions, I feel somehow more connected to that person.
Yeah, so you hit it right on the head. Like, I don't know this, so I'm going to slow down and inquire on that, right? And that feels like disrupted because of the person. But I always balance it like we don't want to interrupt the person because we feel like the person has this agenda that they're talking about. And yet we all have the experience that like we're kind of nervously talking, hoping that they'll like one or two of the things that come pouring out of our mouth. And usually we then talk and wish we hadn't said something. And so when somebody stops and says, hey, tell me about this thing, I'm really interested in this. Like that is the actual thing they're looking for. It's like, oh, okay. Like now I don't have to search. I don't have to do as much, emotional intelligence work to figure out, do you like this? Is this what you want to hear about? You've identified that. And now I can go in. And how you said it, like slow down and get in there, like that purposeful and presence, right? I'm more and more convinced that this type of interaction is meditation, right? That this type of interaction is mindfulness with another person, right? Like, can I be right here? As opposed to like you just described so well, like I'm listening to you, but I'm putting pieces together to figure out where you're going, or I'm asking questions to get you to go to a place. In either case, I am not present. I'm actually a little bit ahead, a little bit behind, right? I'm listening to your story, but I'm processing something else. And I love that description. Like it's really about like being present in the conversation and both people, right? Because like finding like engaging the question and the clarity requires like, oh boy, I got to go back in there. And it's almost like uncomfortable, right? A bit like mindfulness, like, no, I just want the sugar of the tell me the answer and we'll go. And it feels really good in the moment to tell you, oh, here's where you're going. And then that goes away really quickly. Yeah. I love that explanation.
The other person doesn't, in my experience, the other person doesn't seem to mind slowing down. Like there's part of me that's like, oh, well, they have this story they want to tell and they also want to get to the end.
Yeah.
But, they're happy to like stop, go in deeper, and then maybe they never finish that particular story thread.
Yeah. And as you say that, I think about my own limitation. I want to pause here. If anybody else wants to come on stage, feel free to comment in here, or if you're in the guest area, turn on your camera and raise your hand. I'm happy to have you come in. But the part you talked about, like people are happy to slow down and happy to answer. It comes with a bit of a caveat too, because like there is a bit of like in this conversation, the why is already kind of taken care of, meaning like, I'm going to ask questions and what we're trying to do. But that like what I've found is like, I'm okay with it because I like the discomfort. Like I like the person wondering a little bit, and this is just my own. I don't recommend this to other people, but I like the other person. Like, why are you asking this? The reason I like this, the reason I like it, isn't not actually about making the other person uncomfortable per se. It's that because I know that I'm asking it to find the good in the other person, and I also know that that good is there. Right? I have zero question. Like I know that even just starting, tell me your happiest day, that somewhere in that conversation, we're going to uncover it's something that you're proud about, something that you get to take ownership of, some piece of you that like, maybe I haven't seen before. And like, that's exciting to me. And so when somebody gets uncomfortable with it, I'm okay with that because I know that the reason I'm doing it isn't to fix them, but it's because like, oh yeah, no, it's okay. Like, it's okay if we're uncomfortable here because like you seeing this thing is going to be cool for both of us. Right. And I think that having that in the presence, meaning like I'm in the moment with the belief that everyone has something good, right? To share something they're proud about, something they valued, something that matters to them. Some part of this experience that they like that is really valuable to them and therefore to me. And when I have that belief, it's like, oh yeah. No, it's like, you don't see it, but we'll get there. I don't know what the hell it is, but I know it's there, right? And I know that while I'm asking, what I also know is the other person often doesn't think it's there, right? Often doesn't, like you said, like the surprise is, I thought I already knew that story, right? It's like, I thought I knew it was under it, and like, oh, there's something else.
Yeah, there was, a complete lack of processing on my part of that event.
And yeah. But I would actually phrase that a little differently. There's as much processing as we generally do on our own.
Okay. Yeah.
Because they're to sit and there's a value to sit and think through an experience like that on our own. But there's not often like an impetus for it, right? And here it becomes easier because when I'm trying to find out like what it actually is, then there's that impetus. There's now a reason for your brain to go and say, okay, is there something we didn't uncover, right? But if it's, our brain really enjoys the sort of the easy button, if you will. It's designed for efficiency. And so when we debrief or when we think about the experience, if it's like, oh man, you reflected on it on your own I worked my ass off on this. You probably had processed before, that was the first time, with my health issues that I was able to do a whole day. That was a certification that was meaningful, and the connection between like, I hadn't been able to do, I didn't think I could do it, and now I could do it. Given how you showed up in the conversation, none of that felt like new ground. So that was all stuff that you had explored. It was actually just that last little bit, right? So it wasn't that like you didn't reflect on it or you didn't, kind of uncover it on your own. It's that in connection, we just go into levels that we might not go on our own because of the nature of, somebody else is going to ask one more question. Whereas when our brain believes we have the answer, there's no reason to ask that one other question. Right. And I think, kind of broadly to that point, like, mindfulness states, like really thinking and like really being self-aware, can get some of that. but what can happen with connection, like quite honestly, just gets it so much faster and more powerfully, right? Yeah. Want to check in. We have a few minutes left. I generally go over if there's anybody else that wants to jump on. If not, Ty and I can wrap up the day. This is a Finding Good podcast. I call it Finding Blueberries, but with this week's new practice, I think I'm going to go back to Finding Good because it actually makes a lot more sense to me right now, which is just my constantly processing brain. But Ty, I want to thank you for jumping up and have the conversation. I'm curious if there anything else that comes to mind for you of like, insights or questions about this process, or even like questions about the questions I was asking.
I mean, I think the latter part of the conversation made me aware of how important it is to have a little bit of outside perspective, even on, I mean, that was a personal experience to me, but my views were really limited. So you were asking about things that you were aware of that hadn't occurred to me. So it was just interesting how, even though it was my experience, your questions allowed me to deepen that experience for myself. So
yeah, and it to think about that, I think so I want to say it like this: we don't always get the chance for someone else to explore our story, right? Like that somebody else to ask a question. But one way you can get exactly what you're talking about is, so if you think about this, like, this specific situation, I got the certification, I got happy, and you have that, like, I'd like to explore this deeper, right? That the thought that you just kind of shared, like, maybe through somebody else, I can explore this deeper. Well, because I don't control whether somebody's going to show up and ask me questions, a way to explore that is the same way I just did with you. I had this experience, I did this. Tell me where you've done something similar before, right? Like, and that, like, what happens is just the same way I did while you were telling me the story, I'm thinking about certifications that I did. Actually, I was thinking about story brand, and like, I was initially thinking like, I didn't leave that damn happy. Like, what did you do differently? Right. Like, but that, like, the clarity we're looking at our own story is so available in the other person. And so like even if I had never had a certification, like, I've done things that are important. Like I've been happy. Right. And so if I want to explore my own happiness, the best way, the practice of connection is really helping somebody else explore when they were happy. And the difference is, I'm not asking you what I should do, how to be happy. I'm not asking for your opinion, all of that stuff. Like, maybe later. Tell me the moment you were happy. Tell me when you felt the happiest. Tell me when you had to get, like, had to build happiness, whatever the case is. Like, tell me the story of where you were happy, because my brain is going to experience that story as my own. And we're both going to leave with a bit more of that clarity and insight, right? That's not to say we still don't do it on our own. We still don't do those, the kind of, or that we don't want others to ask us questions, because we absolutely do. I just think that being able to explore somebody else's story and use questions to create connection for yourself and the other person puts it into your, into your power, right? Yeah. Awesome. Well, thanks, Ty.
Sure.
This was awesome. All right. So I'll kick you off stage and wrap up. Thanks, Ty. Appreciate you
Brian.
calling in. Yeah. So that was awesome. Yeah. Started this out just by myself. And I if there's any Hail Marys back in there, the people that want to jump on, I'm happy to stay a little longer. I'd love to have 2 in a day, but that's kind of greedy at this point. You can comment in there if you'd like to pull on stage. If not, I'm going to likely wrap this up with a little insight on what you just saw, what we just did, and some of the things we started talking about earlier. Again, this is the Finding Good podcast, Finding Blueberries podcast, whichever we want to call it right now. We're using the Finding Good process with folks. We did that with Ty. which was a whole lot of fun. And this is this is just exactly what I wanted out of these, like in wanted to show as much as like do. And what I mean by that is we started this podcast today and it was just me, and I knew it was just me. And I was fully prepared to, as Ty says, talk for an hour. And Ty was fully prepared to watch me talk for an hour and whoever was watching. And what that represents is that there's like discomfort on both sides, right? It's hard to build connection without a little bit of discomfort. Now, we can ease that discomfort through practice. We can ease that discomfort through how we're approaching it. But we have to challenge this idea that building community, building connection, being able to get the benefits of connection and connection to our brain is more important than food or water. If you've ever had anybody pass away, you've said, I can't eat, I can't sleep, I can't think. That's your brain reprioritizing connection. I cannot overstate how important connection is to our health, to our well-being, and to our ability to achieve and succeed at things. The challenge is, though, when we think it's just supposed to happen organically or naturally, right? Whenever I hear that, that's just habitually, and I found somebody with a similar habit. The fact of the matter is building connection takes work. And the work we saw today was just, turning on the camera and doing the uncomfortable thing, staring at, out in the void and starting to talk. And yet somebody shows up and we make the choice to engage in the Finding Good conversation. And I call it the Finding Good conversation. In reality, it's just asking the person about their experience, but asking it from the lens of your own interest. Everybody's been happy. Everybody's gotten over challenges. Everybody's found joy. Everybody's used a strength. Everybody has, accomplished something that they're proud of or did something that's meaningful to them. And knowing that gives us this sort of unending list of experiences we can ask them about. And asking them about those experiences, the ones we care about being happy, about being proud of something, of doing meaningful things, allows us to find ourselves in their experience, allows us to build connection with anyone. And that what happens in the practice is that it makes it easier to engage in those conversations, right? So when Ty jumped on, it's easy for me to know, like, we're going to go in a great place. I have no idea what that place is, but because we've practiced, because, I'm really confident in there is a value that he's going to be able to share, something valuable, an experience that he'll be able to share that both of us are going to leave feeling better about, then I can engage in that discomfort. And what we get is what we found today, right? That we started with, I was happy for a certification. And we drove that down into, because it meant this battle I was going through had an end. And then as we dug a little deeper, again, just clarifying the story, just allowing the person to tell the details that they otherwise wouldn't tell without another human being asking, we uncovered this idea of breaking barriers. And if you're listening and you listen to that part, it's hard to have a pulse and not get excited when you see Tyler's shift like that, or Ty's shift, sorry. When you see that shift in Ty, it's hard not to get excited, to get engaged. And that happens because when we're engaged in the other person's story, our brain is experiencing that story as our own. We're literally finding ourselves in the other person's experience. And in that moment, we become a little less alone, a little less disconnected, a little more confident in what we can do, and a little more capable of connecting with ourselves and with other people. That's what I want to outline and showcase on this podcast each and every week. I want to thank Ken and Ty for showing up. I want to thank anybody else that watched this week. We are going to do this podcast on Tuesdays and Fridays for as long as I can to be able to show this. You can go to findinggood.com and go to live podcast and sign up for the next one. You can reach out to me at brian@brianfretwell.com if you'd want to be a planned guest. That would be fantastic. That means we talked before and you're on the podcast before. Definitely looking for talking to people about different connection practices that they may be engaging, and also having these finding good conversations. And again, every week there'll be opportunities for people to call in live. This Friday, we'll have an amazing conversation with a very dear friend of mine, Heather Monken, that was using this process 4 years ago in an occupational therapy position with a group of 12 other coworkers. And what they did to affect burnout is really awesome. But what was going on while that was happening, as Heather was dealing with the passing of her 6-year-old son, who was battling cancer at the time, is going to help us look at connection and how it can affect our resilience, our ability to look at the world, and our ability to face things that may seem insurmountable, things that we can't even imagine on our own. And Heather's going to share her experience with that. So if you're around Friday at noon Mountain Time, I encourage you to join. We'll have that one recorded so you can watch as well. Again, my name is Brian Fretwell. Finding Good podcast, reminding you that we can't overcome all of the challenges alone, but there are very few challenges that we cannot overcome together. Thank you all for checking us out. We'll see you next time.